you don't have, Chris Albinson is suggesting, maintain the discipline and the confidence in yourself to continue riding it.
Happy to have $2 billion Canadian companies with you, though. And I think we have two.
I think, so the one point that is absolutely crucial, I think, is when you do find something that takes off, run with it. And you know, the notion that we are obsessed, and by the way, this is a venture failing. You know, people want to show returns early because they're nervous about their next fundraising. So they push you to sell for 150. When you have something that's really working, ride with it because you could be building the next anchor company. So that I completely buy. Now, I'm going to be a little bit with Dave, which is, you know, yeah, Groupon, a billion school, okay. You know, does it bear any reality to most of what you guys live day to day? You know, it doesn't to me. And some of my companies, so Zoopla, we started with 6 guys and frankly, no idea how we'd made money. We planned everything on 90 days, including cash. And we iterated, then managed to acquire an asset and suddenly we're at, $25 million of recurring revenue and we're thinking we got something on our hands. But I mean, I couldn't have predicted that. In fact, we came in thinking we'll probably sell it for 100 and that's okay. And as we're writing the story, now I'm thinking 400 to 500 is a more realistic number. And as I think Suster wrote a great post about this, which is watching, the fake summits. You get to one and suddenly you see the next one and you find a new path. I mean, that's kind of how I like to think.
So just to think about the metaphor, a different way to think about it. This country, 4 years before the Winter Olympics, said we're going to own the podium. And everyone said, you can't do that. You can't say you're going to own the podium. We're hosting the Olympics. It's rude. And we said, no, we're going to own the podium. We are going to go for gold. We are going to build a program that owns the podium, and we're going to get the most gold medals of any nation on earth on our games, on our land. And it happened. So my only point is, if you don't envision it, if you don't go for success, it will not happen. You have to want it. You have to go there.
I mean, I think it's okay to have, you need to have vision, for sure. So big vision, and you need to have ambition. But your plan to get there may be done, I mean, you may get there in steps. So you may have an opportunity that's that big, but then you can focus your approach, win that market, become a winner in a niche market, and then choose to expand and become a billion-dollar opportunity. I mean, I don't think most of the billion-dollar companies, exits, whatever, when they started, they thought of themselves, I'm going to build a billion-dollar company. I mean, we know that's not what Zuckerberg was thinking. Someone else gave him that idea.
We saw the movie.
You saw the movie? In Canada, we all Sean Parker, yeah.
All right. Let me just one.
I've got plenty of questions.
So one thing to think about if you're in Montreal, your likelihood of getting bought is quite low. It is thankful that Microsoft's now local, Google's now local, and they create more comfort with buying you as a local company. But I mean, frankly, the comparisons to the Valley are difficult to uphold. Why? Because the Valley actually sells a lot of companies in the middle. There's the conveyor belt of, I'm going to take a team out of Cisco, we'll build what's on the Cisco roadmap, sell it back to them. And now the conveyor belt is, I'm going to take a team out of Google, and then they'll build something and I'll sell it to Facebook. That conveyor belt is very unique to the Valley, and it actually provides a ton of median outcomes that we tend not to have. So we're stuck with making it work, right? We got to build a team that is sustainable, that is revenues, blah, 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 because nobody's going to come and bail you out, quote unquote. And so you got to think sustainability in everything you do, starting with your team. Because the one thing you can sell to people is retention. If you're in New Brunswick or wherever Radiant 6 is, I've never been there, so, thank you.
I have been there.
If, as I was joking yesterday, my favorite hockey team is Arsenault, but what you can sell to the acquirer is stability. We sold a company called Spotfire to Tipco. They're mostly in Gothenburg in Sweden. They haven't lost an engineer since they got bought 6 years ago. And now acquirers do love that, but you're going to have to work, very, very hard to get your company sold. And it's just something to bear in mind.
Okay. So let's go back into let's try to give the crowd, which is mostly entrepreneurs, some advice. So So yes, so you look for a team of multiple entrepreneurs, but other than ambition, what are some of the other traits that an entrepreneurial team should have?
So when you're thinking, I've been an entrepreneur more than conference, and I continue to love to work with entrepreneurs and work with folks incubating ideas. So try to focus on a big opportunity, and that's either a difficult problem, a problem that customers have that are willing to pay money for. So when I think about an opportunity, we try to get a size of the market, and the size of the market means how big a company can this be. You have to have a reasonable minimum size for capturing institutional investment. So Chris is going to be interested in a company that can conceivably generate 100 million or more in revenues before he's going to invest. So that's one. Look for a big opportunity because it gives you lots of maneuvering. And then think about the margins that you can capture out of that, because again, that gives you maneuvering room. So the questions there are, is it market, is it team, is it product? I come out and really have different perspectives, but I first come out on market. The next one is team. Team's important because you have to have the passion and you have to have the ability, willingness to put in the long hours. It's really hard to do a startup. Most of them fail, you know? So you have to be excited about it. And then the product. Find a difficult problem and then solve it, but also remember that someone has to care about that solution. I've made investments at Alta where we solved a very difficult problem, we had a great team, and then ultimately nobody cared about the solution. So you be careful not to fall into that trap.
You know, maybe just to pick up on that thread, because you know, if I had to say one thing other than be very, very careful about who you hire, right? And that includes your VC, by the way. You have to think about that as you're hiring this person to hang out with for the next 7 years to go build your company. So you should be looking at them and you should reference them like you're making a hire into your company. But I would say the biggest mistake I see...
Well, actually, I'd say more, because you can fire someone. You can't fire a VC.
You can't fire the VC, unfortunately. Although I've seen it done. It's hard to do. The one thing I would say I've seen in some, more in Canadian startups than in US startups, and something to be cautious about, which is the US startups tend to go look for difficult customers. And the Canadian startups tend to look for easy customers. And I can tell you, having done multiple startups myself, E-Trade was the biggest pain in the ass customer I've ever had. And that pain in the ass customer made that company. Because tough customers will make you stronger, make you better, make you smarter. Customers that know all of their options, so they're basically saying, okay, I'm going to bake you off against this, 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 and this, because I'm smart and I've seen it all, and you got to be better than those guys to win. That customer is way better than the customer says, wow, that's really neat, I've never heard of that, I've never talked to anybody who's ever done that before, that'd be fun, I'll give you a little bit of money. You will be a stronger company, you will move faster if you go after tough customers.
As an entrepreneur, the one thing that you have is you have the choice to choose with who you want to work with. And aiming high in terms of, I want to work with this guy because know why you want to work with this investor, know why you want to target this customer, know why you want to have a co-founder and not just an employee. You have that power. That's probably the single biggest power that you have, other than the passion for your product per se, is actually choosing with who you want to work with. And that also means choosing when you want to stop working with that person for different reasons. But that choice, that power, I mean, I've seen entrepreneurs, but you know, how do you call it, the X factor, when you can look at someone in the eye and he's talking to you about his product, he's talking to you how he's going to actually go to market, or how this market he thinks is going to evolve and everything. He doesn't have all of the information, he doesn't have all the research, he doesn't even have the means to actually get it. But one thing that he has this little X factor. Well, often that X factor translates into, oh, it's because I actually had a business model and I wanted to talk to Mr. X, and I cold called him. I called him up and I said, can I have a coffee with you? And he is like, you know, the godfather for this part of the business. Well, there's nothing stopping you to do that, in doing that. And you know, the C100 is one way of actually building the relationship and having access to the right person, having a 5-minute call or a 15-minute call, and getting the information that you need and that you want. That is the single most important element that you have as an entrepreneur. You have the choice of talking with who you want, partnering with who you want, hiring who you want. and then it's just a matter of convincing them to join you because your idea is so hot and you're so passionate about it.
So would you say that location, where you start your companies, has a major impact on your likelihood to be successful?
Radiant 6 proved everybody wrong.
I'm right, depending.
Yeah, all right.
Marcel Lebrun, you started 3 different companies in Fredericton? You know, I met Marcel when he was a young engineer coming out of MBTEL, you know, with just some ideas, you know, and complete conviction that he could build a world-class company in Fredericton, and did iMagic TV, which is a, you know, success for him, and then did something completely different, like Radiant 6, you know, social media monitoring company out of Fredericton, New Brunswick.
4 years ago.
4 years ago, right? And he's just a very, very talented entrepreneur, and what he believed was he could get the best of the best of the best in Fredericton. They would never leave. They would work 24/7. They would have passion. They would have excitement. And he was smart enough to be able to tap into the resources he needed outside.
But I mean, that talks about it talks to the individual, right? So Marcel is he's a moneymaker. He's a great entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'll just have a quick comment. Yes and no. Chris made an investment in a company, Kent. It started in Calgary. For some specific reasons, they moved headquarters to the Bay Area to take advantage of resources there, but they kept all the development in Calgary. There's no reason to move it. What we're seeing today and what we saw in the companies here, I mean, the consumer companies, consumer-facing companies, where it's delivered over the internet, I mean, who cares where they're located? There's really no need to relocate. I think you're fine here in Montreal.
Just try and give pragmatic advice day to day, but if you're thinking about raising money, you're trying to think about building a relationship with a VC. Now, the likelihood we invest in you is, I don't know, it's negligible, right, in reality. Because we look at 300 businesses a year. You know, I'm not a factory, I might do 1.5 per annum. However, why do I do this job? Because I love entrepreneurs, because, you know, I suck their vital energy and it helps me feel more alive. But, you know, I love being around the creativity of entrepreneurs, and I find them interesting. So step one is, don't obsess about looking for money. Be interesting, please. You know, come, let's have a real discussion. I'm a human being, I'm not a bank. Neither are you a money opportunity. You're not your valuation, as Brian Norgard tweeted today from Namesake. And I'll give you one example. So Shafkat Islam is a brilliant young entrepreneur. He was in Geneva, and I thought he was going to put a bullet through his head because he's been trying to raise money for 8 months. He had revenues, he had customers, and the guy was dying. So literally, I saw him for lunch in Geneva, and he's like, you know what? I'm either going to give up, or I'm going to move to New York, or blah, 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 blah. And I said, okay, if you're ready to move to New York, I wouldn't fund him, and I told him very early on, and we became friends anyway. I said, if you're going to move to New York, I'm sponsoring you onto Angel List. Let's go. And so I dropped a mail to Naval, and you know, his funding was closed in 8 days. He moved everybody to New York, and he has Roger Ehrenberg, I think he's got Lara, Josh Steinman, you know, like a whole range of people, simply because he was interesting, right? And I'm not, you know, I'm using this to get a bit of personal brand, but frankly, all it took was one email, and it's because he had a good business. All I'm saying is, he got a lot of leverage out of me, not trying to get my money, but just because he was an interesting guy.
I mean, you look at some of the most interesting companies we've ever had, right? Plenty of Fish, the largest worldwide dating site on the planet today, run out of an apartment in Vancouver. Club Penguin, the single largest returning venture deal we've had in Canada in 10 years, $600 million out of Kelowna, BC. You know, Smarts Technologies, the largest technology IPO on the NASDAQ last year, based out of Calgary. Kik, you know, founded by a 23-year-old who had done a co-op term at RIM, just got funded by Fred Wilson, who funded Twitter and Zynga. He's based in Waterloo. So you can do it. You can absolutely do it. So I fully subscribe to, you know, Chris's point of view, which is, you know, the common element of all of those companies is they never saw a border. They didn't see it. It wasn't an obstacle. They were in their markets. They were talking to everybody who was relevant to their space all the time. They were coming down to the Valley. They were coming down to New York. You know, they just didn't see a border. So
So,
make the
but
border
are
go
you-
away.
Are you saying basically that because there used to be a wall, are you saying that that wall has now come down?
I mean, the wall has come down in so many different ways.